And they couldn't find a casket long enough for his body. That
Absolutely true.
is the title of our episode tonight. No Casket Long Enough. I took that line from David Thomas's book, Killing Pat Garrett. Thought it was pretty apt. A title for this episode on the death of Pat Garrett. You're listening to Forever West Old Time Radio Hour. Love to have y'all back again. Another Thursday. I'm really coming to look forward to these episodes and these hangouts with you guys. Joining me is Doss Boot.
I'm here.
He's here. How you
I
doing,
agree.
Doss?
I agree. I was going to say, I was caught on that last line. I agree. I get more antsy and anxious as we build up to Thursday every week. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And I have talked about before, like, it's interesting how many times we can go over a lot of stuff, but you know, we live in the realm of, like, you know, social media groups, you know, YouTube comment threads, you know, things like that. And with Garrett, like Billy, there are some rather outrageous theories, ones that you can just kind of, you know, laugh off. Just, you know, they're theories. It's what someone believes or what they want to believe, you know, and we get that. I can say, though, with Garrett, even with all the research that I have done, stuff you and I have talked about over the last few years, even after David's book came out, especially, you know, I can understand more and more on the surface why some of these conspiracy theories, especially the one main one, the one thriving one, and we'll talk about that, why it seems, I guess, plausible. I understand it. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people. I also want to point out, too, that when we get started, this first episode will be talking a lot about, like, people will talk about Garrett's financial issues, right? We've talked about that a lot. You got to really know his history, though, to really know that he just really was bad with finances. Now, we've heard lots of things, right? Garrett's a coward. Garrett's a back shooter. Garrett's a pathetic gambler. Garrett cheats on his wife. I've read so many things, but a lot of that does come from film. It does. Is like one particular, like, if you've seen Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid with Chris Christopherson, and, you know, that particular film is one that really shows Pat in a very interesting light. And I've always wondered if that was one of the thriving forces, is visually seeing it instead of, like, reading an actual documented source that could actually support that Garrett was going around and, you know, and visiting hog ranches, as they're called, you know, doing things like that. But there's no such thing, you know, gambling, you know, he had some horse races and that kind of stuff, but not relative to his death.
Yeah.
So a lot of things that people might think we're going to discuss, we're not discussing, right? Like, we're not going to discuss the Fountain murders.
Yeah.
It's literally like 12 years later in the timeline. A lot of people think that he was getting too close. He was going to solve it, so they killed him. You know, that timeline, you know, like I said, I think a lot of people just associate with that, but that was kind of long and kind of done and dusted at that point. You know, it's 12 years later, but we are going to focus directly on his money path and these events that lead to his death, and we'll go down a couple interesting side roads that will be relative, and you will connect everything together. And in part two, I don't know if we'll get to it in part one, probably not, but part two, we may not get to Pat's death until part two, till he's actually killed, because there's a lot to talk about. And I hope, I was telling you this beforehand, I hope nobody gets bored, you know, at this first episode. It's a lot of financial stuff, but it's very interesting. I want to point out, this week's shout out let's get that out of the way, should absolutely positively go to Mr. Mark Lee Gardner for his incredible contribution with the Sophie Poe interview. That was just like really cool that he did that and,
Yeah.
present with you. And he was helpful too with a couple of emails back and forth with you about the
Yeah.
episode that we're doing. And he's got some good stuff about Garrett's death in his book To Hell on a Fast Horse.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
he
this
has
week's
he's just been a rock star with you know keeping in touch with us and talking and sharing his knowledge with us and everything. It's just been fantastic. He's really been helpful and awesome.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you to Mark for everything he's helped out with in the last few weeks.
And I will
And
say, when I got into this Billy stuff, his book "To Hell on a Fast Horse" was actually probably the first book that I read on Billy, and boy, what a good start!
yeah,
What a
absolutely.
good book to start with.
I would say it was probably my third or fourth.
Hmm.
Yeah. Kind of wished it would have been my first in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's still a great book to refer to.
You
So
talked
anybody
about, yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, Doss.
oh go ahead.
You talked about Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
That movie I've come to appreciate so much. When I started out in this interest in this little, niche of history, I was, of course, a Young Guns fanatic. And
Right.
man, when I first saw just a snippet of Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, um, I hated it. I
Yeah,
thought
we've
that
we've talked about this
the
a lot.
casting was horrible. I still think Chris Christopherson was a horrible Billy the Kid, just because he
Yeah.
looks like he's 40 years old. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing about a kid to him.
No.
But
No. Yeah.
honestly, in that movie, I think the character played by Bob Dylan would have made a better kid. But
Yeah.
yeah, I hated it. But I think as I've learned more about the Billy story, it's not by any means accurate. But some of the mythological explorations they do, especially like you touched on with Pat Garrett and you know, on the legendary side of things, it tells
Sure.
a pretty good tale that I think is worth watching as a fan of westerns and western legends. And Sam Peckinpah was just a great filmmaker. So
Yeah.
I really have come to appreciate that movie a lot. I hated it when I first got into all this.
Yeah. Yeah. When we know that our pal Mr. Mills, that is one of his all-time favorite westerns. If not, I think it is his favorite, right? There was a little piece about it in the epitaph not too long back. And I have a little more appreciation for the soundtrack as time goes on. And there
Oh
are
yeah.
yeah, there's some anecdotes in there that I like, but historically, obviously, it's one of the absolute worst.
Yeah.
And I care about that a little bit more. But of course, I know that I still think that the kid from 2019 is probably the closest they're going to get for now. You know what I mean? So yeah, just
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
differences. Yeah, I hear you. But if anyone knows that film, Pat Garrett, Billy the Kid with Coburn and Chris Christopherson, it starts off the beginning of the film. It leads with Pat's death. Remember that,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
way that they portray it, it goes along with the conspiracy theory. It's very interesting. It's almost like they were like, well, we've read it, we believe it, let's put it in the film, or however it was done. But they set it up almost like the conspiracy theory sets it up. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to go. Okay. So
Yes.
we got all kinds of photos and I've got them labeled in there, and some of them will just be correlated with what we're talking about. And if I can remember, I'll try to tell you to pop them up when we can.
Yes.
So a couple big sources for today. I got quite a few. I've done my own research over the years, but of course we got Mark Lee Gardner's, what about 12 or 13 good pages on Pat's death.
Oh yeah.
Leon C. Metz, even though it is a very outdated book at this point, still has some interesting good stuff, like the solid factual stuff on the trial and stuff is in there. But of course, I think the Rockstar book right now, and probably for the longest upcoming time will be David G. Thomas, Killing Pat Garrett, the Wild West's most famous lawman, murder or self-defense. We discussed this book. David took it on the chin quite a bit because of the photo of Garrett that's on the cover.
Right.
It's difficult to not bring up the cover because of that, because it's tough, because he did get a lot of crap for it, and and we were discussing there are certain people that have said certain things, and I kind of understand because the book is fantastic. It's one of the most well-researched books I've ever read, like most of David's books, but that cover can kind of throw things off, especially if you take the true photo identity with true provenance seriously, like we do.
Well, and
So
it kind of steals it's almost like you've created two major talking points with the book that kind of steal from each other, so that
mhm,
the discussion, there was a great opportunity with that book for a discussion to be had about how, hey, he really addresses these conspiracy theories with a lot
sure.
of good sources and a lot of
Yeah, he
good
does.
ideas. And but the power that could have been behind that push, a lot of that probably went to the photo discussion. And so you
Sure.
kind of like divided, the attention of the book. It would have been cooler, I think, if he would have just, maybe if he wanted to be involved with that photo and release it, maybe kind of do it as a promo for the book, but not have made it the cover, and have done it separate from that, just to pack the power a little bit with what he had to say with the book.
I agree. I agree. The cover really took on its own phenomenon in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, because there was a lot of articles that were written about it when they found the photo too. So, yeah. So David's book, fantastic source. I of course have got access to newspapers, archives, so we've got some of those, and a lot of my own research from the past. I've had some access to some photocopies of some Pat Garrett family information for a while, back when I was doing a lot of the requesting the folders and paying for the photocopies through the archives, through the state library. So another big source for a lot of the stuff tonight will be Pat F. Garrett Family Papers, MS 0282, Archives and Special Collections, New Mexico State University Library. Okay. A lot of that information because we got a lot of financial stuff. So everything that we are discussing that I've put in this timeline will be leading. It's all relative to why Pat Garrett is in the situation he is in come February 29th, 1908. Okay. All right. I say we rock on.
Let's
So
do it.
right off the bat, I did a post about this earlier today. I don't know how people saw it. So if in case you didn't, very interesting. Very interesting when they talk about, oh, conspiracy theory, movies do this, movies do that. The true story is so much more interesting. These little intricate details, I think it's a great way to start off. August 1st, 1882, William W. Brazel, the uncle of Jesse Wayne Brazel, homesteads a ranch on Eagle Creek. Okay. And that's a pretty scenic mountain stream and recreational area that's between somewhere near it's Rio Doso and Alto. Okay. Okay. A year later, September 4th, 1883, Pat Garrett purchased a ranch near Eagle Creek. October 9th, 1885, Elizabeth Lizzie Garrett was born there at that ranch on Eagle Creek.
So just
Okay.
about 2 years after the death of Billy the Kid, he buys a ranch on Eagle Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. He's not there long, but he does. Garrett did move around a little bit. Yeah. Okay. February 22nd, 1886. Garrett presented W. Brazel with a fine watch and chain. Okay. Now, Brazel was a captain of Company F of the 16th Regiment of the Kansas State Militia during the Civil War. And once he had settled in Eagle Creek, he erected a log cabin schoolhouse on his property, and then he gifted it to the Eagle Creek community. Now, why Pat gave him the watch and chain, I don't know if it's because of the donation of the schoolhouse, like his public services, for his military services, I'm not sure. But we do have the photo of the schoolhouse in that folder.
Gotcha.
David had that, yeah, the schoolhouse and that he built. I know there's a lot in that folder. There's
I'm
the
assuming you want me to bring it up
schoolhouse.
now, I guess.
Yeah, James, come on, man. Like, oh, you want that? You wanted that now?
Here it is.
There we go. Yeah, so that is courtesy of David's book, and I believe he got it from the New Mexico State Archives as well. So that is the schoolhouse that W.W. Brazel built and then donated to the community, and it became like their first schoolhouse. And Eugene Manlove Rhodes would teach there later in the 1890s. Okay,
That
and
that guy, we could probably do it. We need to do an episode on Eugene alone.
Oh yeah, he's that guy. Yeah, you could do 3 episodes on him if you wanted to. So yeah, a lot of interesting connections. And in the post today, it was on YouTube and in Legends. I found the article. This was printed at the Santa Fe, New Mexican, February 23rd, 1886. And it says, Pat F. Garrett presented Captain W.W. Brazel with a fine watch and chain. So again, not sure why Pat did, you know what I mean? But very interesting that he gifts a fine watch and chain to the uncle of the very man that would kill him 20 years later.
I do have to say, it looks kind of like the building that they all played croquet in front of years prior.
Those 2 monster trees, where did those come from?
There's a lot of croquet chat in the in the live chat there.
Oh yeah, a lot of croquet chat. So yeah, and that article was posted, and that's in the folder too. Yeah, it's February 23rd, 1886, Santa Fe, New Mexican. It's actually, you know, they posted a little thing about him giving him a watch and chain, and I'm like, very interesting, you know. Okay,
let me see here. I'm looking for it.
Yeah, I know. That's why I thought about next time maybe do it chronologically as we're talking, but you know, I just kind of started sending stuff as it was relative in a way. But yeah, it's in there, and it was on the YouTube thing today.
Yeah, it's no problem. There we go. Pat F. Garrett presented Captain W.W. Brazel of South Fork with a fine watch and chain.
Yeah. So, you know, other than the, you know, Brazel spelling, but gosh, you'll see that everywhere. Yeah, so very interesting. So I think, you know, the earliest connection that I could see and, you know, read about, and I thought that was pretty cool to bring up. Okay, here's what's going to really kind of start it off, okay, this early. So Garrett's death, the long game of it, the long con of it, basically, starts June 12th, 1890. George Curry, future governor of New Mexico, applies for a $1,000 loan with the Bank of Commerce in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His co-signers were John F. Eubanks and Pat F. Garrett. Okay. That is going to be a big deal later on. A big deal. On December 10th, 1897, Garrett purchased his home ranch, what would be later known as his home ranch, from W.W. Cox. The Las Cruces Sun reported, Sheriff Garrett purchased 2 watering places from W.W. Cox on the west side of the Rincon, about 2 miles west of the Mormon mine. He has stocked the range there with some fine horses and a bunch of thoroughbred Holstein cattle. Author David G. Thomas noted that the deed book for Donna Ana County for that year is missing, which, again, not uncommon, probably a fire. So David had this article quoted in his book, and as far as we know, that's the first time that article has been presented. So with the deed book missing, it's a very important part. I mean, this thing later on, you have no idea what this article and him proving that he purchased the home ranch from W.W. Cox that came with watering holes, right? 2 watering places. That's also important to later conspiracies. But again, so there we go. W.W. Cox, another big name that's going to come up. So there's the home ranch. Okay. January 26th, 1898. The Bank of Commerce out of Albuquerque received a judgment against Garrett in the Second District Court for $997.92. This amount was from George Curry's loan back in June of 1890, which Curry never paid back. Yeah.
These guys, man.
Yeah. Oh, man. You could do a whole episode just honestly on their relationship, too.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
very interesting how much stuff comes out. Yeah. After Garrett dies.
Just nobody's paying their loans.
No. Okay. Yeah, moving right along. May 24th, 1899. Garrett purchased his Rock House Ranch from David Wood for $200. Sinking Spring, a nearby watering hole about a mile away, was included in the sale. The Rock House Ranch was located basically in the middle of Bear Canyon in the San Andreas Mountains. It's approximately 30 miles or so from his home ranch. Mm-hmm. Now, if anyone, a little quick side note here that I put in here with an asterisk, if anyone recognizes the name David Wood, Wood was the deputy sheriff of Donna Ana County when Billy was tried in Mesilla for the killing of Sheriff Brady. Wood was also one of the 6 men chosen to escort the kid to Fort Stanton after his conviction, where he was turned over to Pat Garrett and then taken into Lincoln.
And if you read the earliest accounts of the kid's death, he is one of the harbingers of that news story. Somehow he received the telegram and forwarded it along. It'll say, special from Deputy Woods or something. We found out that Billy the Kid was killed. So he was one of the first to know that Billy had been shot and killed by Garrett.
Yeah. Yeah. That was very interesting to see his name come there. Oh, and we definitely have a photo of the Rock House Ranch because it still remains. So yeah, there we go. Now that photo is from about 2006. And that comes, it's older. And it's coming from the Friends of Pat Garrett, right? They're kind of like a group very similar to I guess what Billy the Kid's Historical Coalition is like, right? Except they do everything for Pat Garrett.
Right. The Outlaw Gang or any other kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And David was kind enough to share this picture with us 3-4 years back, man. I've had that photo for a while, and you can actually find on a website if you know what you're looking for. He also has a photo from 2018 of it in his Pat Garrett book, except it's from the exact same angle and a little bit further away, and it's in black and white.
I would love to visit this, man.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy, but as we know, and a lot of people know this actually, this is in the middle of the White Sands Missile Range. Yep. So, yeah, that's unfortunate.
Susan says, I hope it gets preserved, but yeah, Susan, it's on that government land, that top secret, White Sands Missile Range, and it's just people can't really visit it, without special permission.
There's a really cool black and white one that's in the folder too that came out of David's book.
Oh yeah, like in the early 1900s, or
I think it says circa 1900.
Right.
But I mean, it's an early photo of it. There's a bunch of people in the front, and in David's book, it says they're unidentified.
Yeah.
So the circa date on the photos, those are always a real touch and go. Like we know that, the accuracy could be off by 20 years a lot of the times. You don't know, but that is it. That's it, right around 1900 or so.
Man, yeah. Look how cultivated it is compared to how overgrown it is in that other picture.
True. Yeah, very true.
Sad. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, man. It's looks like such a great building too.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
parking lot out front with your horses.
Yeah. And so that's the Rock House Ranch. There are no existing photos of the home ranch. I have a photo in the folder where basically it's an online photo that I did from a little bit of research with kind of an assistance from David's book. And then I looked around a little bit more. So there is a picture in the folder, but there is nothing left of his home ranch except for a retaining wall. And I think the retaining wall as of like 2017 or 2018 is pretty much gone. So his home ranch was situated just beneath that rock formation.
just probably around somewhere around here, you think? Like maybe center
Oh, I
right.
can't see you're moving your arrow. I can't. Yeah. Okay. Now I see it because I'm looking on my phone. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of
Yeah.
below and off to the right there a little bit. And then the watering hole for the home ranch would have been within about a mile or so from it. So, yeah. Yeah. David's got a different, slightly different angle of the black and gray photo of that rock formation, but it's like slightly off to the right a little bit more. But yeah, same thing. So, okay. So he got to the home ranch, he's got the rock house ranch, but he also owes damn near $1,000. All right. Okay. February 20th, 1901. Garrett borrows $500 from all people, Thomas Catron. And we could go on to a huge conspiracy podium if we wanted to, just with Thomas Catron's name alone. I don't feel like he needs any introduction at all.
Right.
But if you're not sure, Thomas Catron was pretty much the king of the Santa Fe ring, at least one of them. But yeah, and to me, I think that he is a very terrifying looking individual. His eyes scare me, dude. And I know it's the way these photos are taken of him. I don't think I put any photos of Catron. I might have.
No, I don't
I
think
might
you
have.
did, but I'll search for one real quick here.
Yeah. I don't think I did, but man, he's got lots of them online. But there's a couple of them that make his face and his eyes just eerie as hell to me. So, but Catron was also a judge. He was, big legal man for many years, big corrupt man. Was also a cattleman, just like any of the other guys were. And this is jumping ahead by a couple years, but we know this because Catron is going to write a letter to Garrett on June 17th, 1903, and talks about, literally, he says, that it's in David's book, and I was close to getting a photocopy of it, but didn't get it approved in time. But the letter, Catron talks about, like, you borrowed $500 from me on February 20th, 1901. And there's this whole thing about Catron telling him that there he is. Catron's telling Garrett that, he's in a hole now and he needs that money. And Pat can't pay him, of course. And even if Pat could, I don't think Pat would have.
I don't either, man. I really don't either.
Yeah. So there's that creepy
I think
SOB.
That's the pattern that we're seeing, that, Pat has this tendency to borrow and not really care about paying folks back,
Right. And, we'll touch on that here and there because it's you can't touch on it without, talking about there's W.W. Cox.
Right.
It's like it wouldn't load earlier. Now it loaded.
Yeah.
But the money thing, it is important. It is important in a way. And I don't know what is up with Garrett and some of his decisions, but yeah, like you just said, like he just keeps putting himself in a hole. He recognizes it. And then in moments of quick grandeur, he's gonna get himself ahead. And then somehow still ends up making it worse for himself. So when all the stuff you read in comment threads about Garrett, and you see the negativity and he was this and he was that, well, this is the truth, right? This is what happens. He co-signs for that loan, and then everything with the loan starts hitting him from all angles, and he just does not help himself out, like at all, as we'll see, and Catron's not the only one he borrows money from. He makes attempts to borrow money from Albert Bacon Fall and Emerson Huff, who wrote the book, The Story of the Outlaw. And Emerson Huff responded with a little letter. It was like 2 sentences, like, I'm broke, but I'm in my own financial, straits and hoping that sales from the book turn out, well. And he sent Garrett a copy of The Story of the Outlaw book. So, like, sorry, I can't loan you any money. But Yeah. Okay. So, he's got the wrenches, borrows $500, 1901. Okay. February 21st, 1901. And this is a big one. The Albuquerque Bank of Commerce is going to hire a man named Henry D. Bowman. He is the owner of the Bowman Bank. They hire him as its agent to collect the loan debt from Garrett.
Now,
Bowman,
can I ask real
yeah,
quick, why are they going after Garrett on wait, are we talking about Curry's loan?
yeah, yeah. That's
Why are
all
they
the Bank
going
of
after
Commerce.
just like why not go after Curry? Why not go after the other co-signer?
Well, it's one of those things where I don't think there's any way to ponder it and discuss it without saying that Garrett's getting really just drug over
Mhm.
the coals. I mean, he's getting raped and burned, and because I agree. And there was another
Yeah.
co-signer too, the John F.
Yeah.
Eubanks, but there's
Yes.
no discussion at all in any source that I can find about what the hell happens to John F. Eubanks. So I didn't have a starting point to go maybe, try to look for him. Maybe he was
Yeah.
arrested. Maybe he's an outlaw. Maybe he's a cattle wrestler. I don't know. But there's nothing other than he's just the other guy who co-signs on it. And
Yeah.
Curry, when all of this starts happening, I believe, is in the Philippines.
Oh, convenient.
Very
That's right.
convenient.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that.
So, but would they have gone after him? That's the biggest thing. I mean, because eventually, Curry's gonna come back. He's gonna
Yeah.
become
So
governor. Yeah, dude, I don't get it, man.
Curry went over there for the war, I think.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
And I don't know if he met Henry Hoyt, but they were both over there at the time. Henry Hoyt was a doctor
yeah.
um, in the army at that time, so they were both in the Philippines.
I feel like there's a story about them meeting or
Yeah,
something.
I feel the same way. That's why I said, I can't say for sure, but I feel like they met
Yeah,
over there, which would it's just wild.
could be. We'll have to
Yeah.
look into that one. Okay, so the Albuquerque Bank of Commerce hires Henry D. Bowman to collect the loan debt from Garrett. Now, Bowman asked if they would actually settle for a little bit less than what the amount was due. Okay,
Yeah.
he asked for 1,000. The Bank of Commerce said no because he's literally paid them nothing and has ignored all notifications. And this comes from the Bank of Commerce's financial advisor who is over the caseload. We
Mhm.
have been disposed to be quite liberal with Mr. Garrett in this matter, but he has apparently given so little attention to it that we now feel we should go ahead and have every dollar that is due to us.
So they're offended at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after several more letter communications with Henry Bowman, the Bank of Commerce decides to halt its efforts at obtaining the payment from Garrett for now.
Matt
Okay.
Carr says, Matt Carr threw up a chat. Was Garrett easier to roll over than the other two, perhaps? Was his life becoming a mess at this point? And I think as folks are going to see as we get more into this, yeah, his life was it was
Yeah.
unraveling at this point.
Yeah. That's a very good question. That's a good point because um, Garrett does a lot as a lawman after Billy, but we've always discussed that, he can't escape that. And if we can possibly put ourselves into his gigantic shoes for a little bit, he couldn't escape it. And I truly think that after probably like a decade, I think he was ready to probably just to start assaulting people who just kept mentioning Billy's name, and I
Probably,
think,
yeah.
right, like all his other accomplishments get shadowed over, A, because, he's the killer of Billy the Kid, but B, because he also just kept making bad decisions and, kept putting himself in great positions, but made horrible decisions once he was in those positions. Like
Yeah.
the things he does when he becomes customs collector of El Paso. I mean, he was getting in fist fights in Las Cruces on the street. There's all kinds of stuff with Garrett that's well documented, well witnessed. He wasn't well liked in Texas either. When he was down in El
Right.
Paso doing customs too, they didn't like him there either.
Well, and that's
So
because he was almost too principled in El
yes, he
Paso.
was. Yes, there's a
Yeah.
whole story about him. Yeah, with that the load of the statues, right, of a mother holding a boy over his knee, over the mom's knee. They were statues. They were coming in from like Guadalajara, right? And he stopped them, the whole load, and wouldn't allow the statues to come in because it shows the boy's bare bottom because his pants are pulled down, and the mother is like the statue is the hand reaching back to like spank the bare bottom. And Garrett refused the whole load on the guys that it was quote unquote offensive to him.
Right.
Yeah. That's a well-documented thing. We can discuss at another point, but yeah, all kinds of stuff. So, he got himself in that cattle war too, the Corralitos cattle war. He got himself involved in that too, because, I think they were looking for someone to look the other way. And
he wasn't going to do it. Yeah.
No. He wasn't going to. And that's really what it was, because in the area he was in, they had all these problems with this exact ranch with their stolen cattle and everything else like that. And, manipulating the paperwork for when they crossed over for how many yearlings and how many calves. And Garrett was catching on to it. Yeah. So he just wasn't liked. And I think he was getting more. There's quite a few accounts of how angry he was becoming later in his life too. And I think that's also a big part of it, his attitude and just how he presented himself. And plus, he doesn't give them one bit of attention, the bank, at all.
Right.
Doesn't. Just like, nope. I'm just going to ignore you. Okay. January 2nd, 1901. So, yeah, we were in February, January 2nd, 1901. Garrett was sworn in as customs collector of El Paso. Okay, so he does that after he was sheriff of Don Ana County for like 5 years. Okay, all right. Now here's a big one. Things are going to start going again. Huge. This is very important. April 8th, 1902. Garrett mortgaged his home ranch, Rock House Ranch, 30 head of cattle, and 150 head of horses to his close friend and respected Las Cruces citizen, Martin Lohman. The total was $3,567.50. Lohman owned a merchandising store, and he loaned money to friends kind of as a side hustle or a side business, But what's interesting is why we could speculate. It's crazy. That big photo, man. You're so funny. I just looked, it's like that gigantic Garrett. There is a photo of Martin Lohman in the folder there. But yeah, Martin Lohman and Garrett have their own history as friends. There's a little bit more to it, but I didn't write a lot of the notes out other than it's a big deal with Martin Lohman's connection, obviously paying, getting the mortgage and stuff. But Martin Lohman had a daughter, and man, I can't remember her first name, but she has an accident, and she gets burned to death, and she's like 8 or 9 years old. And if you remember, if you know, one of Garrett's children is named Oscar Lohman Garrett.
Yeah.
So they were good friends, and there is Martin Lohman. Okay. All right. $3,567.50. Okay. But it should be pointed out that Garrett does this. I mean, January 2nd, 1901, sworn in as customs collector of El Paso. He also had his receiver's bond, which I think for $5,000, I think. But then by April 8th, 1902, he's mortgaging, the ranches and, the property. And as a customs collector, he was making $3,000 a year. That's a pretty good salary.
And
for that time.
He's gambling like crazy.
Yeah, something's going on. But we also have to take in consideration, again, because it could be a whole other episode just talking about how many children he had, how many issues each one of them had on their own. It's not just Elizabeth Garrett, who got blinded from the vitriol treatment when she was a child, right?
She had scoliosis or something, or
yeah. Dudley Poe Garrett had, he had scoliosis, something that was bad with his back. Pat Garrett Jr. had his right leg amputated below the knee. because he had when he was like 12 or 13, he got like this crazy like an
Yes.
abscess that just got infected and out of control. And by the time they got him to the hospital, to a doctor, they were a hospital. Yeah, I got him to a doctor or whatever, and yeah, they amputated it. And there's never seen a photo of his amputated leg, but I have seen a photo of Pat Garrett Jr. and he looks a lot like Pat. Um, but yeah, so his kids, the eye thing with Lizzie, all kinds of stuff you would think that he was constantly needing money for. But I think that is a
I
lot of it's a lot of speculation. I don't know what he's doing with all this money unless he's just not pouring it all into home, right?
I
And
I think honestly, I do think there was a lot of gambling, but I think too there was a lot of investment into business ventures that just didn't give him the return he was hoping for.
yeah, and it didn't give him the return he was hoping for because they weren't smart investments to begin with, at least not for him.
No, yeah, he
You know
was
what I
way
mean?
outside of his means.
Exactly. We were talking about how he really wanted that. I think he wanted that businessman life. He wanted that
Yeah.
businessman appeal and, tried running for Senate. That didn't happen. He basically kind of screws up the customs collector job. So yeah, just a lot of constant bad choices,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make Pat a horrible guy or, it doesn't make him a coward or these things, I guess if people want to carry those opinions, but like I said, they're just opinions of people on the internet and, they don't.
I think there are some people who always want to keep progressing. It's always I've got this, I want more. And not even like in a sense that I'm condemning selfish ambition or like wanting
Yeah,
to, I'm not saying that in a way that I'm condemning it, but I think Pat was one of those guys who, okay, I've made 2,500 bucks from this. I need to do something to turn that into like 5 or 6,000. And then he's
sure.
just always onward and upward. And it just never
Right.
worked for him, and
Yeah,
it left
yeah,
him.
gambler's mindset. Yeah, gambler's
Yeah.
mindset for sure. Big win every time, right? Go big or
Yeah.
go home. Yeah. Yeah. And that can, and of course we're speculating a little bit, but I mean, the investments and stuff, those are documented, his mining stuff that all fell apart. And we talked about that. The men that got involved in these ones, well, they had the income and the overhead to, support themselves as a cushion if something were to happen.
Yeah.
And Garrett
Yeah.
just, yeah, he didn't have that financial long game. He just didn't have it,
Yeah. And I
So,
think, we were talking earlier, I used to work in surveillance at a casino, and as
yeah,
part
that
of that,
story.
they taught all of us, if you worked in surveillance at the casino, you had to learn how to count cards because if
Right.
somebody at the tables was doing well and making a ton of money, they were like, run back the tapes and count the cards and see, you check their betting patterns against what the count is, and you can kind of come to the conclusion that, hey, this person is counting cards or not. And
Yeah.
the thing I learned about counting cards is that's just not good enough. You have to have the bankroll to stay in the game because you're going to do a lot of losing. Even if you're counting cards, you got to wait for when that count gets high enough to start making those big bets, and you got to have enough money to stay in the game. I think with Pat Garrett, he never had enough money to stay in the game. So like he would invest in, say, an irrigation partnership with some people, and
Right.
it would look great on paper, and he would throw 90% of the money he had into it, while your partners like Captain Lee or Chisholm or whoever you're partnering with in these huge undertakings, even Poe, they're throwing maybe 30% of their holdings into this investment. So
Yeah.
when things go south in that first initial phase before it becomes profitable, that's okay. They can ride it out. But here's Pat, who's thrown in 90% into his
Mhm.
investment. So when it's south, he has to sell out his share because he can't live while the
Yeah.
other guys can hang out and let that money get lost until it starts making more. And I
Right.
mean, I think he just did that way. He tried to run with those big dogs, and he didn't
Yeah.
really adequately estimate how big a dog he was.
Do you also think it would be it's an interesting speculation that because of the fact that he towered over everyone that he ever came in contact with, pretty much, except for William Logan Reinerson, of course. But I mean, maybe it was like that mentality, that man mentality. Like, I'm bigger than all these men, as in statue. You know what I mean? Like, as a figure, right? Like, I'm bigger. I could probably beat the shit out of all these guys.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
they've
maybe
all
so.
got serious financial gains, and their financial gains keep improving, right?
Yeah, I mean, part of that physical bravado that comes with the frontier, where like
Sure.
your presence and your action is what gets you success, is not always the case in the financial aspect. And when he switched worlds, he kind of probably he might have carried that mentality over. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I'm big enough and I've got enough presence that I can do my thing. And it's like, you don't got enough
Sure.
money.
Sure. I mean, he was the type of guy who show up, arrive in a hotel lobby, and they were writing an article, 4 hours
Right.
later,
Yes.
like this huge man was seen walking through the Marlboro Hotel in New York City. Like, yeah, when he visited, it was just this huge deal because everyone's like, well, look at this huge guy, you
Right.
know? Um, So yeah, I think and even though we talked about how many times he had to be interviewed, and people would bring up how he killed the kid and whatever else, and he couldn't escape it. Do you ever think that sometimes in his mindset he would reassure himself by using that very detail and fact, like, what? No, I killed Billy the Kid. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
this guy. I'm capable of these things. Like you said, I can hang with these big dogs because they're not the big dog. I am,
right.
right? I am. But
Yeah.
they're over there smoking cigars and drinking brandy. And, he's trying to take care of children that have problems. Apollonia, she's not working like that. She, how that whole situation is, she's a Spanish housewife. She's at home,
Hmm.
I don't believe she spoke English. As far as I've ever seen, or sources or anything like that, I've never been able to find anything would specifically say that. I just have a feeling she probably didn't,
Yeah.
or not very well.
Probably
So
not very well at the very
yeah,
most.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's tough, but you have to wonder. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. April 3rd, 1905. Okay, so the last one was April 8th, 1902. Garrett mortgages, all their stuff to Martin Lohman. 3 years later, April 3rd, 1905, Martin Lohman sells that mortgage to W. Cox for $3,000.
No profit on it, just for exactly as much as Pat paid
Mhm.
him, or that he
Pretty
paid
much.
for it, right? Well, I
Yep.
don't know. Yeah.
$567 difference.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. So, W. Cox owns that mortgage. And all of these, a lot of this bank paperwork and stuff, a lot of that comes in the Pat F. Garrett family papers. And also, David Thomas was able to get a hold of the Albuquerque Bank of Commerce archives as well. Okay. So that's where, David's book is just, it's on another level. It just has so much of the factual, documented things kind of showing that, if you're trying to promote and conspire to kill somebody of Pat Garrett's caliber, you don't keep documenting things left and right.
Yeah.
That's just kind of not how it works. You want there to be nothing that's gonna, lead back to any kind of financial burden or problem, but and we're gonna see that W. Cox is going to continue to do this
Yeah.
each
That's
time something.
W. Cox pictured right there in the screen
There he
for
is. And
our
he
for our
was, oh yeah,
viewers.
he was a banker, businessman, owned a couple banks, owned, oh man, by 1910, I think it was. So Garrett's killed in 1908. By 1910, he has something like, dude, the acreage that W. Cox has is insane. And
Mhm.
remember, he's gonna owned up Cox ends up owning the San Augustine Ranch,
Right.
which is a big, big ranch, which was previously, oh, what was it called? San Augustine was where Jesse and all them were hanging out and going to, but it was called something else.
Sheds Ranch.
Sheds Ranch. There we go.
Yeah.
Sheds Ranch becomes San Augustine Ranch. So the Cox family purchased it. I'm not sure what year. But yeah, man, the guy was a big businessman. Lots of money. Well respected. Okay. May 25th, 1906. All right. Sheriff of Donna Ana County, who was sworn in after Garrett was done, Jose Lucero, along with several deputies, they're going to ride to Garrett's home ranch with an execution order from the 2nd District Court to seize all of Garrett's property. Okay. And the execution order included both ranches, all horses and cattle, stables, and roughly 160 acres. They also seized 1,800 feet of pipe that was used to bring spring water to Garrett's home ranch and his corrals.
Mm.
They took the pipe. They're like, we're taking the water pipe. Anything worth money, pretty much. Okay. So Garrett just kept ignoring him, and they probably just had enough and they went ahead and, but I mean, look how much further he made it before they did, right? 1906.
Yeah.
Right. They started coming out from, 6 years before that, and, before 8 years before that, when they first started sending him notice, and he just, ignores it that whole time. So I think he's probably count himself lucky at that time that they waited as long as they did, honestly. But I still feel bad for him at the same time, because I think it's probably safe to say that 50% of his mindset was like, this isn't my debt. This isn't my loan.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So no, yeah. I've got pride. I've got a family. I've got kids. I'm not paying you shit. I feel like because why did he constantly keep, coming into money and then never paying a dime on it?
Well, and
he never does.
And there is a character trait here that we see, and I don't know. I once owned the book, but I never read it. I never got around to reading it. And then I sent it off. I let Mel have it, but Buckboard Days by Sophie Poe. I don't know how much information is in that book, but ever since Mark sent me the audio of Sophie Poe's interview, I've been digging into that. And like we've talked about, there's a lot of inaccuracies and anecdotes and embellishments, I'm sure, but there are some neat little nuggets of truth. And she's talking about what it was that made Pat, because I always read in like the books by Nolan or Utley that they later had a falling out, and that Pat wanted to kill him, and I'm like, but they never said why. And so in this interview, Fred Mazzula actually asks her, why did Pat and Poe have a falling out? And she said, I'm going to read here what she said. She said, Mr. Poe, it all comes in on this story. Garrett came to Mr. Poe and said that he wanted to borrow $2,500. And Mr. Poe says, Pat, I can't let you have it. My cattle are to be in Las Vegas on the 1st of September, and I have to pay for them. So Poe has ordered some cattle to be shipped in, and he's got to pay for them. And Garrett says, oh, I'll have you paid back long before that. So Mr. Poe let Garrett have the money. And he said afterwards, this is just the same as gold. Well, months go by, and Garrett never says anything about paying. And Mr. Poe goes to him. I'll stop saying Mr. Poe, but Poe goes to him a time or two and says, be sure to have that money by the 1st of September. And finally, Pat says to Poe, listen, I don't got the money. I'll help you borrow it. So I'll go with you to the bank and co-sign with you and help you borrow it, he tells Poe. Because he doesn't, $2,500 is a lot of money.
Hell then. Yeah, it is, man. And for that time, absolutely.
So Poe gets mad at Pat and says, I don't need anybody to help me borrow money. I can get money at any bank. I don't need anybody to help me, but you owe me the money. You said you would pay me back. And Sophie says Pat got mad about that.
Yeah.
And so Pat offers to give Poe a check on this, or a note on this other old man that owes Pat money. And Poe says, that'll be fine, endorse it. And Pat says, I'm not going to endorse it. The old man might die anytime, and then it'd go back on me. And so Pat wouldn't even endorse this note he was going to give to Poe for some debt that someone else owed Pat. And so Poe says, well, I'm not taking it. And so that's why they had the falling out that
Yeah.
Pat got, but oddly enough, it wasn't so much Poe, it was Pat who got mad at Poe
Right.
for kind of insulting his integrity.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and
He was
then
so far gone, he wasn't even realize he was insulting his own friend.
yeah, and so Pat tells this guy who's a Mason that, I want to become sheriff, and I'm going to kill Joseph Lee and Pat Garrett, or John Poe.
Yeah.
And so that guy's a Mason, and I've read this in other books, that Mason tells Poe, hey, Pat's gunning for you. And but Poe doesn't believe it, and Poe can't figure it out. And there's this Garrett and Apollinaria give this dance, and they don't invite the Poes, and that's when Poe starts to think, hey, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he is mad at me. And so
Yeah.
that's when that story that Pat rides up to Poe's house with another man and says, hey, your water is going onto my land and damaging my land. And he's trying to get a rise out of Poe. And Poe keeps cool, and Pat rides off. And Poe walks into the house, and he tells Sophie, I think Pat Garrett just tried to kill me. Like, he was going to goad me into a fight and then say that I came at him. He had a spade in his hand. He was gonna say that I came at him with the spade and kill me. And that witness was gonna say, yeah, Pat, it was justifiable, which is exactly what could have happened when we talk about something later on, right?
Yeah.
But we see this trend of Pat borrowing a ton of money, $2,500 in this instance with Poe, and saying, I'll pay you back. And he eventually did pay Pat back down the line, but I mean, and just ignoring it and never bringing it up, never acknowledging it, and just never giving this money back. And could that have happened with Curry? I wonder if Curry maybe loaned Pat some money. Did Pat tell Curry, hey, I'll go with you to the bank to get you this loan for the money you need right now, and I'll pay you back later?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, David G. Thomas comments on, there's like a sentence in his book that, of course, is just, him putting it out there that it's never been stated why George Curry needed the loan. Never. Not what it was for. There's nothing on the paperwork, nothing, that says it. It's just who the co-signers were, the bank, the date. But I mean, I've always wanted the same thing too. Well, we talked about earlier, why didn't they go after Curry? Why did they have to go after the other guy? But as far as I know, I don't know if they had any other kind of financial issue between them, before or after the co-sign of the loan. I'm not sure. What really, and I remember David made a comment, and he saying it as himself. There's never been any record or any indication of what Curry's loan was for. So we had May 25th, 1906, right? They seize everything. The following day, May 26th, W.W. Cox filed an affidavit in the Doña County Courthouse affirming that he was the current mortgage owner on Garrett's ranches and property. Because he clearly wanted there to be legal documentation for it.
Yeah, Pat is losing everything.
Yes. And I will keep mentioning the W.W. Cox stuff because it is important. He sits at the helm of one of the biggest conspiracy theories involving Garrett's death. So that is why all of this stuff is super important, because we're just putting together great information, and it's all gonna bind together, and it will all make sense. That's why it's all chronological, leading right down to that just crazy moment where somebody loses their temper and has zero concern for the consequences. You know what I mean?
So Matt Carr asked, was Pat deliberately swindling or always in the belief that the next big win or windfall was around the corner? And Doss, I kind of lean towards the second. I don't think he was a swindling man.
No,
I
but
think
that's another great question, Matt.
yeah, it
It's
is.
another great question because I would agree with you on that second part that it just seemed like he had the dollar bills in his eyes,
Yeah.
the signs, and he would see things that just weren't there. I don't know. But like you were saying, some people just have like these certain almost like ticks that follow them
Mhm.
like their whole life. And some people just can't learn financial stability. And I mean,
Yeah.
you were talking about like I'm one of them, you're one of them. Like, I mean,
Oh,
come
yeah.
on. I mean, at this point now, like the way the world constantly changes and economy goes up and down and up and down. I'm just trying to survive, just making sure I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I
So,
really think, if Pat was like, "Hey, let me borrow this 2,500 bucks," and then whatever he invested that in, if it succeeded and brought profit, I think he would have paid the person back. But I think when it doesn't and it leaves
yeah,
him broke, he just kind of, "Hey, I'm just not gonna talk about it. I don't have the
right.
money. That's that. I can't pay
Yeah,
you back." And,
right.
there it
What else
is.
am I gonna do?
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, I agree. That's a great question because I don't want to look at him as like a swindler's type con man because it clearly didn't seem like he was, like he knew what he was doing even to be a con man,
Right. I will
right?
say this,
But
he
that's a good point because he can't. I mean, he destroyed a lot of friendships by continuously asking to borrow money, knowing that he
yes.
couldn't pay it back.
And, I mean, he wasn't generous with his money. Like, I mean, if you
No.
think about Poe and McKinney, they didn't get any reward money
That's what
for the
Sophie says, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
As far
that
as I know, that's
John never got
true.
any money. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, if that's the case, he gets a lot of money for killing the kid, a lot of people
Yep.
donating and a lot of people giving him stuff, and then there's McKinney and Poe just like, "Well, F us, I guess. We'll just head out. See
Yeah.
you, Pat."
Well, and you still got to think about it too when we're in that time frame of when it was happening, still probably not as a big of a deal as we think about it being,
Right.
right? Because Billy is as big as he is because we made him that way,
But
right?
I just
All of
think
us
if
did.
we can't help but put ourselves in all situations, and I just think, man, if I'm a sheriff and I get all this money for killing this kid, I'm like, "Hey, guys, you wanna cut of this? I mean, I appreciate y'all coming along, and putting
Yeah.
your lives on the line." Nope, none of that.
How about, yeah. How about,
Well,
dude,
I'm sure that he probably paid them their deputies' wages, and I'm sure he was
right.
probably just like, "That's it. That's the agreement. That's our contract. That's what
Right.
you."
Yeah, you
Yeah.
never know. Maybe they talked about it preemptively and Garrett was like, "This is what I'm
Mhm.
paying you. That's that." Right? And there's no
Yeah.
more to it. But yeah, how about, you could throw McKinney at least 20 bucks for the fact that he had to trip on the porch and fall in front of Billy and get laughed at.
McKinney was the last person that Billy ever laughed at.
Yep.
How about that?
Laughing 10 seconds before he gets killed.
Yeah.
Okay. And then things just kind of start getting a little more interesting because as everything we've just been talking right now, some of it's speculation, some of it is based on what we're hearing. He just continues to fight, right? Pat's going to keep fighting.
Yeah.
Whether it does him any good, not really, but it seems to work for a little bit. And we've already reached the hour part, but we got a lot more, of course, because we're not even to his death. But we're getting closer because we're at 1906. Okay.
And I think it's safe to say that his walls have come down a lot in terms of
Yeah.
his irritability,
Yes.
his antagonistic behavior, which was always there. I mean, this guy has always pistol whipped people who said bad things about him in newspapers and things like
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
But like, it's really his tact and diplomacy are wearing thin, I think, in these later
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Where there are some accounts of him just Emerson Huff, a few other people that have dealt with him and were friends with him at different times of his life that he increasingly grew more, like you said, agitated, angry. um but I've never heard if what did he feel this way, did he act this way because of his money problems? that was constantly on his heels, and he gets one big, long, lanky step ahead, and then it gets 10 steps ahead of him. I don't know. But sometimes I also wonder too if it was a lot of that anger and kind of animosity he felt towards the media for never, leaving him alone about killing the kid.
Yeah,
A lot of stuff. He was just kind of a bitter man in his later age, and a lot of people seem to kind of confirm that. So, but
absolutely.
yeah, so this is interesting. Okay. June 23rd, 1906, Garrett's attorney, some of you might recognize this name, James, I know you will, Herbert B. Holt,
Mhm.
filed a writ of replevin against Sheriff Lucero. Now, apparently, Garrett's going to claim that some of the seized property didn't actually belong to Pat, but to his wife, Apollonia Garrett. But the claim, because remember, they took quite like all the horses, the cattle, everything. The claim is actually the claim for Apollonia that they took some of her property. It was for one bay stallion named Gray, valued at $150. One sorrel mare named Skip, valued at $50. One dun mare, no name, branded O on the jaw, valued at $50. One
Hmm.
Jersey cow, unnamed, branded O on the jaw, valued at $40. So that's his claim, that those particular animals belong to his wife, Apollonia Garrett. Therefore, Sheriff Lucero had no right to seize them. Okay. That's his first move by the attorney to kind of fight a little bit. Okay. Now, the Bank of Commerce, which is what you would do legally in this situation, they're going to have the properties reappraised. Okay. On July 6th and August 4th, the Rio Grande Republican printed 2 notices regarding the sale of Garrett's seized property. That sale took place August 4th, 1906. And wouldn't you know, the only bidder and buyer was the Albuquerque Bank of Commerce. They purchased each
Getting it.
ranch for $500 each. On August 17th, Don Annie County auctioned off half of Garrett's livestock. The very same day, W.
Wow.
W. Cox renewed his mortgage on Garrett's remaining livestock.
Wow.
Yep.
I just want to
Okay.
real quick
Yeah.
give a shout out to Jeffrey Michael Burton for his support. He left us a tip there.
Jeff.
So
Yeah, I know Jeff. Yeah, I know Jeff has all the cool documents that he purchases and shares. I believe that's
cool.
Jeff.
I'm not sure. I do see him on
Yeah,
Facebook.
I know his name. I swear that was him.
Well,
He
let us
used
know if it
to
is. Yeah.
chairman the coalition and
Jeff.
all the time. I swear that's him.
I do remember somebody sharing all these cool documents all the time. I don't remember it being
Yeah. I
Jeff,
think
but
he was either working somewhere and had access to them, or he was legitimately going to auctions and buying them. I'm not sure, but he had like some like crazy legitimate like original Lincoln County like war documentation.
is
If
that
I'm
you,
thinking
Jeff?
of the same guy,
You got those papers, Jeff?
Jeff. But thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Yes, I own the Billy docs, including Billy's warrant.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's him. Yeah,
Well,
that's him.
it was lots of good stuff in those Facebook groups to see.
Yes. See, that's where it's at, though, man. A lot of times, yeah, there's great stuff in books, but in books, a lot of times it's going to be a lot of repetitive stuff because is there a lot of new stuff that's changing the game? I mean, there's a few things here and there, but a lot of it's the same info. But there is a lot of great stuff that pops up in Tombstone Epitaph articles, in True West articles, even the online stuff. There's lots of good stuff that pops up in groups, and you just have to be as active as we are to kind of constantly be just swallowing it all. You know what I mean? Because I just try to Pac-Man as much as I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way, and you forget a lot that way, but that's why you just use your expensive cell phone and your laptop to put all of these documents and photos into folders, and so you can access them quickly. You know what I mean? And otherwise, it can really get out of hand. You just got so much stuff that you can share.
Yeah, there's so much.
Okay.
Dude.
All
John,
right,
do you think the O brand stood for Oscar? Because didn't Pat put one of the properties in Oscar's name at one time?
I'm not sure about Oscar. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
know what you're talking about. We're going to cover that, but I think it's the one you're talking about is with Poe Garrett,
Oh, okay.
the
Yeah, you
Rock
might be
House
right
Ranch
about that.
lease. Yeah. But because Oscar would have been a child at the time, but that's possible. I was wondering what the O was too.
Hmm.
I was trying to think of something immediately because Pat had his own brand for a while, was even printed in newspaper articles, and it's not an O. So,
Right.
yeah, I was wondering the same thing, but I didn't, go any further than that. I just thought it was interesting that I could find that information. You know what I mean? That they were like, no, these are my wife's animals and we want them back. I don't know if that worked out in their favor, though. I'm not sure. Okay. All right, so they've got the ranches, and W.W. Cox renews the mortgage on Garrett's remaining livestock that were not auctioned off. All right, so the start of 1907, that was all 1906 stuff, Seeds property, all that. We're at 1907. Now, the start of the year, I had to double check this because David said in his book, I double checked it and actually found it in Leon C. Metz's book as well. At the beginning of 1907, Garrett is actually still in possession of both ranches because the bank, due to the agreement, has to wait 1 year to take ownership.
Huh.
Okay. Yeah, that was interesting. So Garrett's already attempting to dispute the ownership of the ranches, right? Because he is saying, and his attorney is saying, said that the home ranch was his homestead. And that the claim is that the homestead could not be used to pay a debt. Okay. And then Garrett is going to claim that the Rock House Ranch wasn't actually his, but his son's, Poe Garrett. Poe was 19 at the time. And on the original bill of sale for the Rock House Ranch between David Wood and Pat Garrett, it is only Pat Garrett's name signed. So I think this is a very, very clear-cut case of Pat trying to do anything he can at the attorney's behest to try to fight this as much as he can, even if it means lying.
Yeah, oh
Right?
man, he's reaching for
Yeah,
anything. He's trying
absolutely.
to
Yeah,
keep his head above water.
sure. Just and all of this is all relative. This is why. So when you read comments about, yeah, Garrett was a bad this, a bad that, and he did this with his money. Well, this is what was going on. And do you notice that none of this, we're revealing how he keeps getting in a deeper financial hole with all these digits, but we don't see him doing anything smart with the money that he
No.
is acquiring because he's not paying the loan. So the more and more me and you have talked about this, we're big Pat fans, but as much as I researched him, that seems to obviously be his biggest hiccup in life was these financial debts. And it is insane to watch how he just kept taking a match and, setting, pulling a match and putting a little bit of gasoline on his feet. You know what I mean? Just a tiny bit. It's just like a little bit at a time. And he's so tall. It's like a little slow burning wick to get to the top of his head. And then he's just gone, in a weird like metaphor. It's weird and almost like you said, tragic to constantly watch him make these decisions that he keeps making, especially putting himself in a financial deal with a known killer like Jim Miller, right?
Yeah.
Something that, has got to be pointed out. Like, not sure what he was thinking, but I think this is kind of the point. I'm not sure he knew what to do anymore at all. And it was just constant acts of desperation,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he still got the ranches. He says Poe owns the Rock House Ranch and that the home ranch is his homestead, so they cannot legally take it due to debt. Okay. Now, he says it in his book and in Lincoln in 2023, when I spent a good 2 hours with David, we talked about this. Okay. So I put it in my note. Author David G. Thomas comments that the Bank of Commerce case file showed no further legal action taken towards Pat Garrett. Okay. And then David offered up his own opinion, and this is what he told me. And just, in the book, and it's what we talked about. And he said the only thing he could think of was that the Bank of Commerce accepted the homestead claim and accepted O. Garrett being the owner of the Rock House Ranch.
Huh.
That's the only thing he could, he said, I'm just speculating, but there's no more legal action. It stops.
It's understandable, but given how hard they worked
Yeah,
to keep the fight going, that's wild.
Yeah, and I said, "You're sure?" And he said, "Yeah, I had access to all the archives." And he goes, it was a huge case at the time. So there's so much paperwork because there's refilings, and he's just like, I don't know why, but after that date, it just stops. So very interesting. Okay, all right. And we talked about this a little bit a while ago, but yeah, and right about this time in 1907, he's going to try to borrow money from both Albert Bacon Fall and Emerson Huff. Fall told him he couldn't because he also was in financial destitution. Fall then is going to ask Garrett about the $50 he already loaned him, right? So he had already borrowed money from Albert Bacon Fall, I think, like 5-6 years previous, and $50, and yeah, he never paid him. So again, somebody else that, not as big as a $2,500 loan, but still just absolutely no attention or care to paying it back. Okay.
Or acknowledgement when you're asking for more, even acknowledging,
yeah.
Hey, I know I owe you already. Not even an acknowledgement like that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think I'm going to read this last one and then we'll stop because we're getting close. We're getting close. Yeah. But I think this is a good place. March 11th, 1907, Poe Garrett. I put this in here myself. Most likely at the behest of his father, Pat, leased the Rock House Ranch to Jesse Wayne Brazel. In his letter from January 3rd, 1907, in his letter to Albert Bacon Fall, Pat mentioned that he would love to have some cattle placed on the Rock House Ranch and that he wanted help with that, right? And then it would benefit for growing future livestock. Okay. Now, this lease was signed by only Poe Garrett and not Pat. Okay. Now, the original one was just Pat's name, and Pat was like, oh, no, I sold it to my son Poe, but there's never any paperwork or anything of the original paperwork that has Poe on there. Okay. So I am going to read this here. Okay. It's a lot. We're going to read it directly from the paper here. Okay. So this is the lease between Poe Garrett and Jesse Wayne Brazel. I, Poe Garrett, party of the first part, agree to lease to Wayne Brazel, the party of the second part, my ranch property, which I, party of the first part, do lawfully claim as being my own individual ranch property. The party of the second part does hereby agree to brand for the party of the first part 10 head of Hereford calves and 1 mare colt each, and every year in the month of July for the period of 5 years. This stock branded each year is to be considered full payment for each year, and the party of the second part, Wayne Brazel, does agree to keep annual assessment work upon said property as required by law, and the party of the second part does agree at the end of 5 years to give peaceable possession of said property to Poe Garrett, party of the first part. This property is known as the Rock House and Sinking Springs Ranch and is situated in the north end of the Black Mountains mining district of the county of Donna Ana and territory of New Mexico. The party of the second part is to put necessary improvements on the ranch at his expense. Okay.
Very important wording.
Very important. Now, let's think about this. Catch this. If the annual payment for the lease was the 10 calves and the 1 mare, this would imply that Brazel was signing to place cattle and horses on the ranch
Right.
as part of the lease agreement. Okay? So now we have that very important piece of lease agreement, that documentation. 3 months later, Brazel is going to borrow $574.80 from his employer, W. W. Cox. And with this new loan, Brazel is going to purchase the infamous goats and place them on the Rock House Ranch, which of course directly violated the terms of the lease that he signed with Poe. So, because the payments, right, would have come from increased livestock over time.
Yeah, I mean it violates the implicit terms, but not the explicit terms. I mean, Brazel could have said, it doesn't say I can't put goats on here. There's no explicit forbidding of goats.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. I guess that's true. If you wanted to get super technical, whether or not he was smart enough to be that.
Right,
but
you're right.
I don't know how smart he was, but no, that's a good point. I guess, you know, if you want to get real technical.
Well, and I think too, like I think everybody would have known, like Colin says, it devalues the property. Like even Wayne, if he was being respectful, he would have asked the Garretts, like, hey, I'm wanting to put some goats on here, because we all know what goats do to the range. And it's like,
right. Yeah.
And I didn't known better.
And I don't know that much about ranch life to think about that, but I had an asterisk because David G. Thomas comment on it, Leon C. Metz comments on it a little bit, and that one part about the lease and the goats, that goats apparently are much harder on the land than horses and cattle.
Well, they eat everything.
Yeah.
They just literally turn it into like a barren land.
Yeah. Okay. All right. One more. January of 1908, Garrett's going to try to get Brazel's ass thrown off the Rock House Ranch.
Right.
How he's going to do that is an old New Mexico statute that states that it is a crime to herd livestock within 1.5 miles of a ranch house or settlement. Garrett filed his complaint with the Justice of the Peace in Oregon, a man named C.N. Anthony. And he states that Brazel was trying to achieve this with the goats, right? This is what he's trying to do with the goats. Yeah. Brazel was arrested, but then released. A hearing was held before the Justice of the Peace, where arms were apparently openly carried. And then we had to talk about this. Mark Lee Gardner said in his book that they dismissed the case, but David G. Thomas says that Garrett withdrew his complaint, and that is supported by the El Paso Sunday Times, March 1st, 1908. So I'm not sure what happened there, but it says Garrett withdrew his complaint. And then there's a quote here. When asked later about the difficulty with Brazel, Garrett declared he wasn't looking for nobody and did not want any trouble. There's no truth in the statement that I was gunning for Brazel, and I expected no trouble from him.
So it sounds to me, from two details, that it was everyone was armed. I mean, they're giving the idea that it was a hotly discussed matter. And Garrett's quote, it sounds to me like Garrett was like, I'm a little in over my head here. I didn't know it was going to be so dangerous to do this.
I think that's possible, or just maybe even just worried that it wasn't going to go his way. I'm not sure. But what the sources that I found, it says that Garrett withdrew his complaint, and it kind of seems like the statement kind of supports that. I don't really want this level of trouble. I don't want anything to cause further problems. Maybe, I'm not sure. So yeah. And I think that's a good spot to stop, because we're very close to Pat's next horrible decision.
Yeah.
And that building.
Go ahead. I was going
to say that building right there. That is where Justice of the Peace C.N. Anthony heard Garrett's complaint about Brazel's goats.
Yep. I will say, I was reading Gardner's book, the passages about the death of Garrett, to Hell on a Fast Horse, and he included this quote from Garrett that I think sums up how we've been speaking of Garrett, and kind of probably, Doss, how me and you feel, and maybe some viewers as well, about the tragic nature of Garrett. He says, as winter set in and little by little the days became shorter and cooler, Garrett became more bitter, angry, desperate, and depressed. Earlier in the year, he had written to Emerson Huff, and this quote I think gets to the heart of it. Garrett said that everything seems to go wrong with me. That is, that's the theme of his life, it seems.
Sure.
Everything seems to go wrong with me. And that's the vibe that we're going into episode 2 with,
And and his other famous quote about years later, how he said, "Sometimes I wish the kid had done his business on me."
One of my
I wasn't the one that was here.
It's one of my favorites of his.
That's tough, man.
It shows the painful awareness, the self-awareness of his situation. Like it's not lost on him that things go south a lot in his life. That's wild, man. I see Garrett as a tragic character.
I do too. He's such a, beast of a man. And we talked about that earlier, about that, what that persona probably did to his mentality of how he thought about himself,
Yeah.
And then he kept failing at all these things. Maybe he felt like he was failing his family, I'm not sure. So, I thought it was a great first episode. A lot of great facts. Like I said, it's all important. We now know why he's so financially buried. We know what that's from. And all the documentation has always been out there. It's in a few books, but David's book, again, covers a great amount. And I definitely highly recommend it to anyone who does not have it. It's great. Honestly, just for the photos alone, it's fantastic. So when we return next Thursday, we will discuss how the El Paso Herald, March 2nd, 1908, is going to report that Deacon Jim Miller and Carl Isaac Adamson is going to arrive by train in Las Cruces from El Paso to visit the ranch of a man named John Leatherman. They are looking, they told Leatherman, to buy Mexican cattle to sell in the United States, and we're looking for a convenient ranch to graze them until fall. And while that did not work out, Leatherman informed them that he knew the former sheriff of Donna Ana County, Pat Garrett, was hoping to sell his ranches. We'll see you next week. Forever West, Old Time Radio Hour.
You guys have a good week.